Welcome to This Explainer. You know, we talk a lot about the modern internet economy being this kind of Wild West, right? As digital transactions have completely exploded, they've left behind this massive growing justice gap. Everyday digital interactions, from automated smart contracts to freelance microtasks, are constantly happening without any clear, accessible legal safety net. So today we're going to look at how a truly fascinating decentralized platform is stepping up to act as the sheriff in this new frontier.
Here's what we're covering today. The Web3 regulatory gap. Meet the decentralized sheriff. Curated lists and compliance. The game theory of justice. Submitter versus challenger. And finally, the future of decentralized law.
All right, starting with Section 1, the Web3 regulatory gap.
So to really get the solution, we first have to grasp the problem. Legal scholars are actually calling this out directly. The online economy has just totally outpaced traditional small claims courts. I mean, think about it. If you have a dispute over a $50 digital asset, or some complex DeFi protocol goes sideways, you're not exactly going to drag that down to your local courthouse. We literally have this massive regulatory void, and we desperately need a justice system that moves at the actual speed of the internet.
Which brings us to Section 2. Meet the decentralized sheriff.
Enter our protagonist, Kleros. Now, that name actually comes from the ancient Greek kleroterion, which was this democratic lottery system they used in Athens for picking juries. But instead of pulling stone plaques, Kleros is built right on the Ethereum blockchain. It doesn't rely on the blind trust of a few appointed judges. Instead, it acts as what they call an epistemic engine. Basically, a truth-seeking machine that uses crowdsourcing and game-theoretic economic incentives to reliably ferret out the truth in disputes.
For the longest time, the hardcore crypto mantra was code is law, meaning whatever the smart contract did, that was it, final, even if it was a total mistake or a hack. But we're actively shifting away from that chaotic mentality. We're moving towards compliance by design. That means embedding proactive regulation and decentralized dispute resolution straight into the ecosystem's DNA. Moving right along to Section 3, curated lists and compliance.
So instead of just settling one-on-one contract fights, Kleros has actually carved out this massive niche acting as the compliance officer of the crypto market. A huge chunk of their caseload revolves around keeping what are known as curated lists clean. Imagine a decentralized exchange that only wants to list valid, safe tokens, no scams, no malicious code. Kleros acts as that decentralized sheriff, certifying tokens and making sure only compliant projects get to play in that specific sandbox.
The stark contrast here is pretty wild when you think about it. With traditional centralized exchanges, you've got arbitrary closed-door standards dictating what gets listed. You basically just have to trust a tiny group of corporate execs. But this decentralized sheriff, it uses an open, economically incentivized crowd. The house rules are enforced entirely out in the open by regular users who are financially driven to keep the ecosystem completely clean.
Let's dig into how that actually works in Section 4, the game theory of justice.
So how are these digital deputies selected, and why on earth would they act honestly? Well, to even be considered for jury duty on Kleros, users have to buy and stake a specific digital token called the Pinakion, or PNK. It's a direct nod to those old bronze plaques from Athenian juries. By staking this token, you're literally raising your hand and saying, hey, I want to do the work and I've got the funds to back up my integrity.
And that staking part is absolutely crucial. First off, it stops Sybil attacks dead in their tracks. That's when a hacker spins up thousands of fake accounts to hijack a jury. Because staking costs real money, trying to buy out a jury becomes ridiculously expensive. Plus, it gives jurors actual financial skin in the game. And here's the kicker. The more PNK you stake in a specific court, the higher your chances of being randomly selected to hear a case.
Once you're picked, you review the evidence. But here is where it gets super interesting. You cannot see how the other jurors are voting. This runs on the Shelling coin model. Since jurors are totally isolated and they know their payday depends on agreeing with the majority, their safest, most logical bet is to just carefully analyze the evidence and vote for the most obvious objective truth. The truth literally becomes the magnetic center of the vote.
The brutal efficiency of this system is honestly a thing of beauty. If you're a coherent juror, meaning you voted with the majority consensus, you get your staked PNK refunded, plus you earn a cut of the arbitration fees. But if you're an incoherent juror and cast a minority vote, you actually lose a chunk of your staked tokens, and those get handed right over to the winning jurors. It literally pays to be right, and it costs you to be wrong.
All right, Section 5, submitter versus challenger.
Let's see how these bounties play out in the real world, especially when someone tries to sneak a shady token onto one of those curated lists. Kleros doesn't use a centralized authority or some paid moderation team to hunt for fraud. Instead, it relies on a decentralized network of very vigilant challengers. These are community members actively hunting for non-compliant tokens because they want to earn a bounty for exposing them. It essentially weaponizes financial deposits to force the ecosystem to self-police.
Here is the true genius of the system in action. Say a submitter wants to list a token. They have to put down a financial deposit. If a challenger looks at it and says, "Nope, that breaks the rules," they also throw down a deposit to flag it. Then, the Kleros jury steps in, reviews the evidence, and votes. The winner gets their initial deposit back, plus a really hefty chunk of the loser's deposit. This heavily incentivizes users to hunt down fraud, because exposing a bad actor is incredibly profitable.
Finally, Section 6, Future of Decentralized Law.
So, where does this wild mix of modern blockchain tech and ancient Greek philosophy actually go from here? Well, while Kleros is absolutely dominating the crypto compliance niche right now, their endgame is way bigger. They're launching Kleros Enterprise, essentially acting as a B2B outsourcing service for dispute resolution. They want to bridge the massive online justice gap across traditional e-commerce and freelance microtasking. But to get that mainstream adoption, they still have to tackle some structural hurdles, like those notoriously high gas fees on the Ethereum network.
So, it all comes down to this. As automated smart contracts continue to dominate our online economy, who do you actually want acting as the sheriff? A centralized corporation behind closed doors, or a decentralized, economically incentivized crowd? It's a deeply provocative question, and it completely redefines the future of trust on the internet. That's what makes grasping this stuff so absolutely crucial. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a clear picture of how decentralized justice is being built from the ground up.